It's now time for the annual meeting question period. We've asked registrants to submit their questions ahead of Ahmed to ensure that we have detailed answers to your questions, as well as address common themes that emerged. If you didn't get a chance to submit a question ahead of time, not to worry, you can still put your questions in the chat on the right-hand side of your screen. We will do our best to answer as many questions as time permits today. A reminder that those on their phones or tablets will not be able to access the chat function. You must be on a computer or laptop to see that feature in the virtual portal. If there are questions left unanswered from today's question period, college staff will respond to those questions via email within the next 2 weeks. I'll now invite Danitha to come up and respond to some of the questions that we did receive ahead of time.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much, Sarah. So this is my favorite part of our annual meeting, when we get to go through some of the questions that you've presented to us broadly, and then we'll have some time in the end as well for some live questions. So one of the main questions that come up is just the difference between the college and the various associations. And this is a good question. And definitely when you're in your day-to-day work of just ensuring that you're providing great care to your clients, it's hard to differentiate between all of the organizations that you interact with on a day-to-day basis. So we want to just make sure that we understand that the college is the provincial regulator of social workers and social service workers. We, the college, has a mandate to protect the public. And the way we do that, fulfill that mandate, is as a regulator, we set the entry to practice requirements. We maintain and ensure the registrants follow a code of ethics and standard of practice. And we require registrants to continue with their ongoing education through the continuing competence program. We also maintain a rigorous complaints and discipline process. Now, our mandate is actually spelled out in the Social Work and Social Service Work Act, which is available on our website if anyone's interested in reading acts and legislations. But it does actually have a section called Objectives, which lays out clearly what the college is expected to do. So from that act, we have also regulations that fall into it and bylaws. And these are sort of the structural portions that allow the college to carry out their day-to-day operations. The college includes providing guidance and resources and supports to registrants, because in order for us to fulfill our mandate of public protection, we have to engage with our registrant base. And as I go through some of the questions throughout this presentation, you'll see the many ways that we try to engage with our registrant base to understand what the professions deal with on a day-to-day basis in the province of Ontario. But when we're looking at the associations, and, we have OASW for social work and OSWA for social service work, these are advocacies for the profession, and it's beyond the values and the mandate of the college. So the professional associations would advocate for, wage, employee shortages, workplace conditions, and that's where the associations would come in. If you're interested in learning more about the associations, we ask that you reach out to OASW and OSWA. These are voluntary associations to join, and they can speak through with the details of their work. And I should have actually proceeded to that slide so you could have seen it as I talked through them. So I'll spend a couple more minutes on it just to say that the college is always available to answer any questions. And the primary piece to keep in mind is the college is the provincial regulator. Its primary mandate is public protection. So everything that we do would be within the scope of public protection. When we speak to our ministries and when we discuss things with other key partners in the province, we're always finding ways to ensure that there's registrants that are situated in parts of the province to provide care where there's gaps and needs, all in the interest of public protection. So the next question that came through is who can help me answer questions about my practice? Now, we know in your day-to-day practice, there's a number of spaces that you can go to receive information about your practice. When we're thinking about the standards and the code of ethics that we have at the college, we want you to remember that our professional practice department is available. Now, they're available through practice consultations, but we're also available through other spaces. We can do in-person or virtual workplace presentations. We have our practice notes that go out. We have webinars and video resources. And it's important to think through all of the different spaces that you can access this information. As the college grows, we're currently over 30,000 registrants. The ability to interact individually one-on-one becomes more difficult, but we want to still be there and be available to the registrant base as much as possible. So we want you to be aware of all these different spaces that we exist as well. And if there's ever an opportunity for us to come and present to larger groups, please write to us. We want to be in those spaces. And that's the best way for us as regulators to understand what practice looks like, is to be in different parts of the province, in different employers, different spaces, so we can learn what the practice is and what's current. And that ensures us to ensure that the standards remain current as well. Moving through, this is how you would book a practice consult. We have a scheduling set up through our booking system on the website. The consultations time slots are about 30 minutes long. Our professional practice staff always appreciates us staying to the timelines because they do have many requests for consults, and they do a fantastic job. So they can guide you through some of those specific practice questions. It's also important to keep in mind that you may have some questions that are best answered by legal counsel or accounting if it's specific to your professional corporation. And in those situations, the college staff will let you know that that is the best avenue to take. Because we're in a position where we can talk to you about the standards and how the standards would apply to certain scenarios, but we're not specifically in a space where we can give you exact advice to do what you should do next in that situation. And that's sometimes difficult when you're feeling like you need to talk to somebody and you're looking for those next steps. So just to sort of set expectations, when you call through to our practice professionals, our professional practice department, they're going to talk to you broadly about the standards and how they fit into those scenarios. Moving through to something I spoke to in the recording as well is our very new, and we're very proud of our Coffee with the College. This is another great practice resource, and it's a webinar series that we've been running with professional practice. Coffee with the College will be offered once a month, except for July and August and December. All the sessions are held from noon to 1, and the next session is on June 11th. This is June 12th. Sorry, typo on my sheet. June 12th for anyone that's listening. And what's important to remember about these Coffee with the College sessions is that you can sort of attend passively. You can see what information's offered. If you want to participate and ask questions, you can put in any questions on the actual web chat. You will have to register for it to attend. And our staff will have different departments present throughout each of these Coffees with the College. So it's good exposure to different areas of the college and different topics as they come up. Another question we often get is what titles can and cannot be used by registrants? And this is a good question and speaks to the piece of legislation that governs the work that the college does. So the Ontario College of Social Workers and Social Service Workers is title protection legislation, which means that if you want to call yourself a social worker or a social service worker in the province of Ontario, you must be registered with this college. If you want to work within the scope of practice, but not call yourself a social worker or social service worker, then perhaps you may not need that registration. So it's very important when you are out there using the title of social worker and social service worker that you do hold a registration with the college. And here we have the different titles that are available to be used when you are registered. Employers cannot refer to their employees using these titles either, unless the individual is registered with the college. And if we can go back to the public protection mandate, that's to ensure that the public of Ontario are aware of who they're dealing with when they're receiving care. Are they receiving care from a registered social worker or social service worker, or are they receiving care from an individual who may have had the education but are not registered with the college? and what the impact that has, and this is something I feel quite passionate about when you think about what regulatory practice means, is that an individual has concerns about the care that they receive, wants to ensure that this individual is registered. There's the public register that they can look the individual up in. If you're practicing it within scope but not using the title, then you don't belong to a regulatory body. There's no space for you to bring concerns or to look the individual up, to have that continuity of care. So this is similar to all the other health professions that are out there, and that this is why it really matters. The title matters. So it's important we use the titles that we're able to under the registration, and these are listed here. And it's really a registrant's responsibility to let digital and print publications, as well as their employers, know which titles can and cannot be used. So this is a responsibility that we all carry. Moving through, another question that's come up several times is, can the college add clinical social work category of registration? So this is about the possibility of expanding social workers' scope of practice to include diagnosing mental health disorders and creating clinical social work class of regulation. Now, it's important to keep in mind when you look across Canada, some provinces do have this clinical class of registration available, but Ontario currently does not. The college independently doesn't have the authority to expand classes, so we can't just sort of go into sort of a back room and say, okay, we're going to create a new class. This is why I referenced the Act when we started out this presentation. So in order to add a new class, you'd have to have the Act reviewed and opened up to allow for a new class of registration. And that ability has to be initiated by the Ontario government. So we work closely with government partners, and we don't have any information about this specifically at this time, but there is continuous conversations about ensuring that our Act is modernized and up to date. Another question that's come up frequently is around any updates on child and youth workers registered with the college or being registered with the college. This is a interesting question, and there's certainly been a lot of news and media attention towards child and youth workers recently. It's important to note that currently, child and youth workers are not required to register with the college unless they are referring themselves as a social worker or a social service worker. So what this means is an individual who may have had an education in social work or social service work, who's gone into practice in child and youth, who's not using the title of social worker or social service worker, does not need to be registered with the college. This actually means that they operate outside of the regulated system, the child and youth workers, and they're under the oversight of the government specifically. So there's been some discussions back and forth with the government in terms of whether this ends up falling within a regulated profession. But what's important to keep in mind is that even if a child and youth worker have a degree in social work or a diploma in social service work, they're not required to register unless they're using that protected title. Currently, the only individuals in the child and youth sector that are required to register are directors of children's aid societies. And they are mandated to register with the college. The college continues to work with the government to advocate for appropriate regulation where possible, and this is an ongoing conversation. Another question that we have around this is, can I be registered in Ontario and another province at the same time? So the simple, short answer is yes. Yes, you can. We can, as long as you register with the appropriate province, you can hold multiple registrations in multiple provinces throughout Canada. It's important to note that if you are registered in another province and then you're looking to register in Ontario, what happens between the provinces is the provinces speak to each other to ask if that the registrant is in good standing. And if they are in good standing, then it's direct registration in the subsequent province. We can speak for Ontario. If you're in good standing in another province outside of Ontario, the registration process is very simple. There's a verification registration form if you're interested in registering in another province that you would fill out, and that's how we ensure that province to province we're speaking to each other and identifying whether individuals are in good standing when they practice. And that's available on this link that's before you. I think that brings me to the conclusion of the questions that were put before us. And we have some time, Sarah, I believe, for live questions.
We do, yes. Thank you. I also just want to make a comment to thank the registrants who are really engaged today in the conference platform, answering questions and really supporting each other in the questions that they have, which is really great. Also, just to note that we'll put a link in the chat about the upcoming June Coffee with the College, which is held on Wednesday, June 11th. So we'll be sure to put that in the chat just to make sure everybody is on the same page. It's on Wednesday, June 11th. So, Denitha, we've had a couple of questions related to registration fees. One question noting whether or not we've considered having a lower registration fee or a different registration fee based on the category. So whether you're an RSSW, so a social service worker, versus a social worker.
Thanks, Sarah. And I'm very sorry about the June 12th. I was scanning the audience as I was going through my presentation. I won't do that. I'm scanning the audience now regarding the registration fee question as well. No, I'm kidding. The discussion has come up more than once. It's a great question about a variation in registration fees. Over the years, the difficulty that we've encountered is that it goes into an individual, like a single budget that then gets distributed equally amongst any of the concerns or education that comes through. There are other regulators that have separated or segregated the two funds. It creates a bit of a financial issues on the back end, but it's certainly a discussion that we have entertained and will continue to look through because I understand that the two professions have different pay grades and the fees are often an issue that comes up. So we are very aware of it. One thing to keep in mind is that the fees have not gone up drastically in the last few years. We had a recent fee increase in 2023, I believe it was, and we're in line across nationally for other provinces who regulate social work only, unfortunately, because social service work is only regulated here in Ontario, with New Brunswick starting to regulate social service work in this coming year. So generally speaking, the answer is immediately there's no movement in that direction, but that is a topic of discussion that continues to occur.
There's also just a clarification question around whether any potential upcoming registration entry to practice exams are going to be applicable for current registrants at renewal, or is it only for new applicants?
Oh, I love answering questions with good answers. No. So it's not meant for current registrants. If you are a registrant that continues to keep yourself registered and active and in good standing. And what this means is that when what comes up for renewal, you're not letting your registration suspend or for non-payment, or you're not interested in being registered that year because your employer doesn't require it. You're continuing to be registered year after year. When the exams come into play, the exams, you would not be writing those exams. They're only meant for applicants at that point in time. So of the 30,000 plus registrants that are currently registered with the college, the exams don't have an effect on them. When the exams are instituted, 2027 is the date that we're looking at. It would be anyone registering after the date by which we announce the actual date of the exams.
Thank you. We have a question around the complaints process. So the registrant noted the complaints process is lengthy and does not appear to address concerns in a timely manner. What is the college doing to ensure the public's concerns about registrants are addressed quickly?
It's a great question. We have noticed a year-over-year increase in our complaints as well. As our registrant population grows, of course, naturally, what grows with it is the complaints and concerns that are being brought forward. That's not to say that there's concerns of registrants that are practicing out there. It's just the awareness that individuals have of the college. We're looking at a number of ways by which addressing some of our workflows for complaints, areas like early resolution, ensuring that we're communicating with our complainants and our registrants in a quicker manner, triaging the cases to ensure that we're addressing the high risk cases. before some of the lower risk matters, which we're currently doing and actually adds to some of the backlog that we're experiencing. Those are some of the things that we're working through. So, staffing is always one area, but it's also looking at our workflows and finding opportunities to work with other agencies. There are situations sometimes with complaints where we're duplicating a process that might have actually occurred in another agency. And we also want to see where there's opportunities to share information and move through the process a little bit faster. But the reality of this is, though, within the complaints process, that there are blocks of time that are legislatively mandated where we have to allow the registrant time to respond. We have to allow for medical records to be obtained. We have to allow for legal counsel when they're involved. That becomes another fairness issue. So there are those sort of statutory times that is the reality by which we have to operate. But within that, we know that there's opportunities for us to keep complainants informed, the registrants informed, and we definitely can do better in those spaces. And we're working towards improving those workflows.
Thank you. We have a question related to practice resources, one about how the college plans to address or what resources are available around AI in healthcare settings. If you wanted to touch on that a little bit.
We actually have a practice resource that was out around AI that we've recently put through. We're working on looking at what the environment is around AI and then building relevant resources. When we step back from it at a sort of a very, very baseline level, what we want our registrants to be aware of is that they're not using any sort of AI generated or any other type of tool if they don't understand how it's working, that they are not putting anything that's confidential in nature into those systems. So we will continue to develop other resources around this, but the messaging will remain the same around confidentiality, being aware of what you're using. What you're doing is always at the best interest of the client first. So, there might be reasons to use some sort of product and it would be of best interest to the actual registrant, but is it truly in the best interest of the client? And we really just want you to work under those principles. But we will have some resources coming. We know the ground is shifting. It's very difficult to really state something with any kind of certainty when there's continuous change all the time. So that's part of, as a regulator, you tend to be conservative in your approaches. You don't want to say anything that would be maybe wrong later. And that's very difficult in the world of AI because the movement is fast. But we will get more resources out.
Thank you. And I know that we've had some college staff posting resources around AI in the chat function as well. So thank you for that. There seems to be quite a few questions around the using or being able to practice the controlled active psychotherapy. A lot of individuals asking whether they're permitted to use the title psychotherapist. We can also share some of that information that we have on the website, but wondering if you wanted to touch on that.
Yeah, I think our practice resources will be shared on the chat as well, Sarah, I'm sure. But I think the piece that we want to make sure the registrant base understands is that graduating from a social work or a social service work program alone does not give you the ability to practice psychotherapy. There's a number of, and we can post the resources, checklist of items that you should, additional training, supervision that needs to be in play prior to practicing the controlled act of psychotherapy. And that's really the big takeaway. Leaving school with your social work or social service work degree, diploma, master's does not give you enough knowledge to practice the controlled act of psychotherapy.
Thank you. We do have a number of questions that likely relate to the roles of the association. And so maybe, Denise, if you wanted to just, maybe if we're able to change and put that slide back in terms of the role.
Do it. Here we go. There we go.
Okay, that's great. I know that there's very specific questions related to practice resources, so we'll be adding some of those pieces now. And I'm just looking at the time, perhaps one final question before we wrap up. There's, again, more questions around the fees. So we have a number of individuals asking whether or not there's opportunities to pay monthly payments or installments as part of their renewal fees that are due at the end of the year.
Unfortunately, at this time, it's a single payment that we require at the renewal period. We open our renewal period in end of October, early November, and the secret to all of this is that we run the renewal period until January 31st without the late payment kicking in. So even though technically the renewal period ends December 31st, because of the way the bylaws are set up, there's one free month where you can wait till January 31st before you pay the fees and before the $50 late fee kicks in. So unfortunately, at this time, it is a single payment during that renewal period.
Thank you, Denitha. So I think this concludes the 2025 question period and today's annual meeting. Thank you for your attendance and participation. The meeting is now adjourned, and we will have a break until 11 this morning, at which time we'll be able to invite Professor Charmaine Williams, Dean of the Factor-Inventage Faculty of Social Work at the University of Toronto for today's keynote address. Thank you.